Kia ora tātou, tēnei huihuinga tātou Strategy and Policy Committee meeting. Tēnei au mihi nei kia tātou ko harama nei tēnei rā, tēnei ahi. Mihi nei kia koutou katoa, councillors, staff, members of the public that are watching on the Zoom. Kia ora mai tātou katoa. We've had our waiata and our karakia at the earlier council meeting this morning, so we won't need to do that again. That'll tie us through to the end of this hui. But just a big welcome to you all. Nau mai, haere mai, piki mai ka kia mai. Just to let everyone know that we are live streaming the hui, so if you're speaking to your mic. Same with the staff, anyone needs to speak, we'll speak into the mic so people can hear on the live stream. Our councillors also use their iPads to read their papers. And yeah, so we have Councillor Harvey on Zoom, and we have a few of our other presenters, Craig Batchelor, Rebecca Ryder, all on Zoom today. We have apologies from Councillor Travis and Tanya Eden, our Heretanga Takotonoa rep, who has since resigned from the committee, so we saw her out yesterday. Gave her a bit of a mihi when she came in. Oh boy. Alrighty. We've conflicts of interest, we'll just deal with those as we go through the agenda. We have the minutes from our last meeting on the 22nd of March. Those have been out previously to the council or to the committee. Can we get a mover and seconder for those, please? Councillor Dixon. And who else? Councillor Lawson, seconder. All those in favour, keep my eye. Any against? Carried. Councillor Nixon is on a bit of a sojourn. He's gone out to Flaxmere. Should be back within the next 15 minutes, I'd say. So, kapai. Hey, we've got a big agenda today. A number of these papers have been previously workshopped or have gone through subcommittees. So, we'll try and move through the agenda, and that should help us because most of the discussion and corridor have happened previously. So just to note that. In terms of item 4, my chairman's update. Kia ora, Craig, for this awesome report. You do a good job. You do a good job, mate.
I delegated this one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, he was away.
But we'll take it as read. I'll just identify a couple of highlights here. Three Waters, and we'll have a bit of a report later on. But Three Waters is going forward in terms of the government bringing together a number of working parties and implementation groups. Taumata Arawai has certainly been stood up and aim to release their requirements later in the year. But we will have a report on that. But the short of it is things are moving forward quite rapidly in the Three Waters space. Back just down to our agenda, future growth management. We've been, as I mentioned in our last meeting, Hastings is experiencing significant growth in housing and infrastructure. And to manage that, we have a future growth unit which has been pulled together, and Ross McLeod heads that unit, and they are doing a number of projects at the moment to help the council look at manage growth going forward. So a future development strategy, FDS, is going to be a key part of how we manage growth. That this is a statutory requirement of council to have a future development strategy, and work is underway to look at how we develop that. In addition to a FDS or future development strategy, we have also started work on our regional spatial strategy. Okay, so yeah, a whole lot of work going on within this council to look at how we manage growth going forward. A key part of both of these strategies will be participation and partnership with mana whenua, iwi and hapu. And a report or a scoping report will come back to the council on how we manage, or how we look to frame that up and work those relationships with our mana whenua partners. So yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff going on around the future growth pathway for Hastings, and I will say that most of us had the opportunity to go out on our field trip back in May, our bus trip around Hastings, and I don't really need to go through the details of this report because we had an opportunity to see that kanohine. And yeah, I mean, it was a pretty awesome trip, and there's a whole lot of work going on in housing, Flaxbeer, Hastings, our commercial and industrial developments that are happening. And Nigel, gave us the opportunity to take us on a bit of a tour to see all that body of work. So we have a quarterly activity monitoring report around that, and that's in your report there. But in conclusion, I mean, I'll just take you to this report here, which is our Hastings Economic Development Quarterly Update. And as you can see, which is consistent with what we saw on the bus trip, is that Hastings is pumping. Economic development-wise, we're doing really well, up on pretty much every statistic that I can see against the New Zealand average. GDP, consumer spending, house values, I don't know, yeah, that's higher, tourism, etc., etc. So, these are good signs for our community, for our district, but they come with challenges, and part of those challenges is how we manage growth going forward. And so this Strategy and Policy Committee is really concentrating on that. And so you'll see that in the body of these reports that we have today. A lot of it is around how we're managing growth. So with that, I just want to acknowledge Nigel and the team, Ross, Craig, and the team for all the work that they're doing, supporting the council to manage it effectively.
I could just, through you, Mr. Chair, obviously make the point that what was referenced to bus tour and what we see and what we know, that's been validated recently with the Infometrics economic analysis that's been presented, and I think worth reflecting that Hawke's Bay is the #1 performing economy in New Zealand, with all of the constituent parts doing better than the New Zealand average, but the top performing part of Hawke's Bay by some distance is Hastings, and it's worth reflecting on. And whilst it has the range of things that we are dealing with in terms of the challenges associated with growth, I think it is worth reflecting that for the year ending compared to pre-COVID economic activity levels, our economy has expanded by nearly 10%, and I think that's worth kind of recognising and celebrating that we're part of Hawke's Bay. Hawke's Bay is #1 in New Zealand, and within Hawke's Bay, Hastings is the best performing economy.
So can we just get a bit of a paki for Hastings? Kia ora. Question time?
Yes. As I read through this report and being aware of the local government reforms or not just, central government reforms that are being imposed on local government. We've got the three waters with regard to ownership, then we've got with regard to regulation, and then it's trying to find out what the solutions might be. We've got local government reform, we've got the RMA reform. We know that out in the big world, there's the health reform. For more personal for me is the health, forestry changes. So my question is, well, first to acknowledge the work that's been done in the background and how the Chief has been able to create a team to keep ahead of this surge. Just want some reassurance that we're still supporting that team well enough, because it's not easing off.
No, not easing off. I think one of the things, and I just want to acknowledge the leadership of the governance table here as well. I mean, we clearly, we are operating in a context of a lot of reform. Across all of the things that you've mentioned, Councillor Kerr, and other things, civil defence reforms and what have you. I think we need to stay abreast of that, but be focused on the things that matter most to our community. And I think, the fact that this council's recognised the need to not try and do through business as usual how we plan for the future, the leadership around the regional spatial plan, our future development strategies, resourcing that, we are well placed. In the Three Waters, context, clearly the region is Hawke's Bay. We've been very joined up, worked closely together, and again, just acknowledge Craig Thu. We've stood up a transition capability so we can engage with all of this and make good decisions. So it's going to need to be a watching brief, but I think we are as well placed as we can be, accepting that there's still a lot of uncertainty, with the next couple of years, but also backing ourselves that out of change also comes a lot of opportunity.
Kia ora. Have a firster. Can we have a seconder? Oh, did I first it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, okay. I'll first it. Seconded by Tan. All those in favour, keep my eye. Any against? Oh, did you have a question? You sure? Okay. Thank you. Carried. We're going to move down to jobs for Hiratonga project update, item 5. Sasha Williams is, she's online. Kia ora.
So just by way of some introductory comments, because I want to set this in the bigger context first, because part of what's been happening in Hawke's Bay and particularly Hastings over the last period of time, there's been a lot of investment flows, but again, it's worth reflecting on. The Minister Nash has just released the evaluation of the Provincial Growth Fund analysis and the thousands of jobs that were created. It is worth reflecting on that Hawke's Bay was the region that received the 4th largest amount of pūtea out of that fund. Again, in a Hastings context, it's worth reflecting we have received hundreds of millions of dollars directly into Hastings across infrastructure, sports infrastructure. So the things that we know that's going on in the regional sports park, $33 million Olympic swimming pools, $8 million hostels, private sector investment, over nearly 60 million, Bruce, that's come directly onto the council's balance sheet for infrastructure for housing. We've been very successful in receiving a lot of money, and this is a report back that I'm really pleased to see coming back. That was one part of the COVID response, which was the $9.3 million that the government invested in Hastings as part of basically what at the time was thought about, responding to COVID redeployment opportunities. There was a $9.3 million investment in State Highway 51, improvements in associated roading, and but with the express and purpose of basically getting a whole lot of locals into employment. So the team know, because there's a little bit of other background context here. Sandra, you'll remember it well. 7th of November 2019, when the council was sworn in. This council was sworn in at Waipatu Marae. A quite strong representation that was made from mana whenua about the importance of addressing issues in Waipatu that they felt hadn't been addressed. And so this is important on so many regards. And so those are just some introductory comments. I think, delighted to see this report come back to close out what has been achieved for the 9.3 million jobs for Hira Taonga package.
Kia ora. Francois, are you doing this?
Oh,
Okay, kia ora.
thanks for
Kia ora,
the.
Sophie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. Apologies for not being there. I'm actually at home with a sick boy. So Francois Blay and I are going to run you through the Jobs for Hira Taonga program. The first slide, Nigel has, he's pretty much covered it all off, but next slide, cool, yeah. So like you said, it was 9.37 million we got from the Shovel Ready COVID fund, and we used it as an opportunity to trial the progressive procurement toolkit that was newly developed. The roles that were prioritised were for women, rangatahi, Māori and Pacifica. There were 19 projects overall, 9 local contractors undertook the work, and we were kindly funded a Jobs Connector role by MSD and an expense fund to provide that pastoral care.
As Sasha has indicated, and Nigel referred to, we received almost 9.4 million government funding for shovel-ready projects. These projects comprised largely State Highway 51 Waipatu upgrades, but also smaller components, minor improvements to community footpaths, highway network and cycling upgrades, a few safety projects, and then the big one, State Highway 51 Waipatu, where we had a significant improvement in the amenity. The contractors that we selected is, when we set out on this fast delivery program, we had to find a mechanism to engage with the contractors very quickly. So we explored how we can engage with existing contractors, where we can issue variation orders to existing contracts to mobilize teams to perform this works. But then these were identified for the major components, but for the more simplistic works, we've assessed how we can extend this work to the smaller contractors, engage the smaller community of contractors. And we went through a process of identifying contractors from our vehicle crossings lists, which is in concrete works. We've invited all those contractors into council, briefed them on the program and the outcomes we require from the program, and 5 contractors came back and said, we are interested in this work package, we want to join and participate in this. And then the work were assigned to these 5 contractors based on their specific capabilities and resources. And then what was most important for us was that all of the contractors in this pool were local contractors, all 9 of the contractors. We had the 4 big tier 1 contractors, Fulton, Russell Road, Higgins, Downers, and then smaller contractors, Topline, ACL Civils, Dodge Contracting, ProSeal, and McNady's. And these are the guys who delivered for us on the program. Although the objective of the contract was to deliver the work, big emphasis was on the number of jobs we're going to create, and at the early stages we estimated to create or provide 158 roles an opportunity, of which about 20 to 30% we estimated for new roles. And in the end, we created 210 roles, of which 48 were new roles, new people in roles. Oops.
Oh.
That's one back.
Okay, so the people, there were 48 people new to the civil infrastructure industry that were given roles. MSD coordinated the recruitment process, and we prioritised those most impacted by COVID. So of those 48, 45% were Māori, 19% Pacifica, 31% women, and 50% rangatahi. We also came up with a pre-work program to deliver courses and certificates for those, because most of them were new to the industry. So that included health and safety certificate, traffic control, construct safe, programs like that. And then Topline were part of the program, but they operated slightly different. They had funding to provide in-house pastoral care, which included a van for pickups and drop-offs. The pastoral care model covered wellbeing, career training, financial and workplace support. So licensing is a big part of that industry. So that was a big focus of mine, getting people to move up their licenses from their learners to restricted. And we did some class 2 and 4 truck licenses. I supported them through some training in quals. So a few were doing the Connexus apprenticeship. And for those that weren't keen on the industry, we'd help them with their CV. We did career plans for over 70% of those on the program. And I also provided workplace support. So that's, looking at contracts, helping them deal with difficult employer conversations. We did a team building workshop at Higgins. So that was looking at the soft skills around communication, motivation, and attitude. We're lucky enough to have our whānau connector and Hinenaro connector from Mahi for Youth come and support me. So that was, we're dealing with some addiction, some loss. Someone had suffered a lot of bereavement and had a miscarriage. So having that expertise was really cool. And I was also there as a support for contractors. So they knew they could pick up the phone, and I've kept those relationships, which are really helpful in my current role. The outcomes. So like I said, 48 were placed into jobs, and we definitely prioritised those that were most impacted by COVID. 26 remained at the end of the project, and most of those were on permanent contracts. 15 others we supported into other roles in different industries. We've built stronger relationships with the local contractors. And like Nigel said at the beginning, it was cool to have that massive community-driven project at Waipatu. And it was great to collaborate between HDC teams. So it was projects, asset procurement, and our team. And then we also strengthened our partnerships with MSD, Waka Kotahi, NZTA, and EIT, and of course the community. And we got some great feedback from MB when we sent the closeout report back in, especially around the social outcomes piece, and they acknowledged that HDC do a lot in that space, which I think is really cool.
So just in terms of closing off and opening up for questions, I think, for me, this spoke to a whole lot of things that this council's COPUP has been about for a long period of time in terms of our Mahi for Youth program. I particularly want to acknowledge too the 9 contractors, but particularly our smaller contractors, because I think we strengthened the relationship with those providers, Topline, Dodge Contracting, and again, people that are really, as employers, really committed to the same outcomes that we are. And, we all know Taurus's story in Topline, but I'll just share in finishing off that, we've all been learning how to do this in practice. So one of the very early conversations with Taurus was he priced up the job at Waipatu. I think initially our roading engineering team had a bit of a problem with the price. Taurus rang, and this goes to the strength of the relationship, and said, are you full of the proverbial, or are you really about this COPUP, or are people getting real skills and real jobs? And it was a conversation that had to find some solutions, because at its heart was about progressive procurement. We weren't just buying the footpaths and the roads. We were actually looking to create a broader set of enduring outcomes. Annie Aranui at the time that came to the party found a solution, but I think and Sandra, we heard this again recently when we met with Taurus, that the 12 people that Taurus took on through this Jobs for Head of Taonga scheme, 10 of them are still employed, with Taurus or other civil contractors today, and I think it speaks to the focus that we have. Our LTP pillar, pathways for our youth, working in partnership, using different and innovative toolkits like progressive procurement to actually drive outcomes for our community. So that's it from me, other than I want to take the time to acknowledge Bex and Denise and Sasha and the rest of the Mahi for Youth team. And I know, I was really proud last year that, you guys were recognised, and unfortunately you came runners up to ourselves in the Social Wellbeing Excellence Awards in local government. But I think this is a project that we can be incredibly proud of, that is part of a broader kaupapa that we have as an organisation with our community and our partners.
Right. Thank you for that. We have a question or comment from Your Worship.
Kia ora through you, Chair, and thank you, Sasha and Nigel, for the update. This is a fantastic result, and to see that 26 people still remain in the industry is magnificent, and that we were able to redeploy 15. That's really, really important for me as well. See how. But what I'm interested in really is the broader view now, because when we first started our Mahi for Youth policy, maybe 6 years ago, things have changed significantly, and we need to be thinking about, how we revisit that policy in terms of, if our unemployment is at 2.9% across Here Taonga, unemployment never been as low since the 70s. I'd be really interested to know what our NEETs figures are, and because our biggest opportunity now, because there aren't any more people, and I haven't seen any government immigration policy that is showing that we're going to get any more people soon coming from elsewhere to fill these enormous job vacancies. So I think looking strategically, Chair, how we manage this framework now, what was when we had 17, 18% NEETs, what we have now, which I don't know the figure, and where we get to with this, the wider view of how do we manage, how do we make sure all of our rangatahi who are out there, and how do we create a zero policy, zero NEETs? Because someone will tell me what that number is, but it won't be zero. So I think it's really important as an action here that while we've got a policy and a framework and funding from Crown, where to from here? And that's the work that I'm interested in. But this is a fantastic outcome. Congratulations to everyone. Has anyone got that next number offhand?
No, but we can, through you, Mr. Chair, we can come back to you with that. I think you're bang on the money, Your Worship. The unemployment rate in Hawke's Bay is the lowest that it's ever been. Just to comment on a couple of the observations you've made, you're right. There is a forward strategic context that we need to now think about employment. I'm conscious that in a couple of weeks' time, the Regional Skills Leadership Workforce Development Plan and focus areas are going to be released. The emphasis for us as a region is, yes, an ongoing commitment to our rangatahi, but also working with those for a variety of reasons that are unemployed, a big focus on our mums and how we get more of our mums into the workforce and understand the barriers that they're facing for employment. And, one of the primary actions for the next year is also a stock take of the existing employment programs, because there are many. And I think the strategic question for us in that broader context is also in the future of local government, what do we see as the role for the council? And I think the question you're raising, Your Worship, how that might, what that might be, how it might evolve from just mahi for youth. So I think that is absolutely the strategy work that we'll do, but it has to be done in alignment with the regional the regional skills strategy that's been through, Matariki, but I agree with you, it's going to have to change in the context of a very different world since borders closed, what happens post COVID, and in record employment, but also record levels of skills, and job vacancies not being filled, where it's going to require us to be quite innovative, including how we think about our own role as a council, recognising that we are one of the few councils in New Zealand that actually do this mahi.
Thank you.
Yeah, Taurus and Topline had a staff retreat out at Mihiroa, it was last week. And I went out there. He invited me out there to have a kōrero with the staff. And he's got quite a few staff now, Nigel. He's got quite a few. Must be
60.
Yeah, something up like that. Yeah. Anyway, I did talk to them about we talked about the importance of whakapapa. I mean, they were on the marae, and them knowing where they came from. Some of them knew their pepeha, some of them didn't know, and they just didn't know how they connected to Heretanga, which was weird. Anyway, I talked to them about that. I talked to them about all our ancestors that came on the Takitumu Waka, and I was asking them questions. Oh, what do you know about Kaununu? What do you know about Tamatea? What do you know about Rongokaho? But at the end of it all, it was around just knowing that they come from some pretty amazing people, in their whakapapa line. And that, you might be, he's doing some good work with them in their trades and civil works. But I says, hey, you've got to remember who you are, where you come from, because you don't just stop there. You've got to go there, and then you go there, and then you go there, and you just keep going to the next maunga, the next peak. So my just while I'm on that, just commenting on it's good to have our rangatei in employment, but we need to be moving them along and up in that career development. We want them being the managers and the CEOs. So support your kōrero, your worship. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and just to acknowledge that, I know that is being talked about, those questions are already being asked, and what the role is for council and how this is going to evolve and etc. in the future. And perhaps that could be contained in a cradle to career strategy. However, what I wanted to speak about really was just to congratulate the team. I mean, this is such a great result. All the targets have been hit. And I just absolutely loved sort of reading some of the outcomes, which were about not only the gaining the practical skills to enable people to do their mahi, but also that they gained self-confidence and pride. And I think that's such an important part of this role. So congratulations, team, and it just goes to show when there's partnerships, central government, local government, private people, what can happen in this space. So, I'm excited to see how this is going to evolve in the future.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Good. Apologies for arriving late. I was at a tangi, one of our Flex Me icons passed away. When I say icon, he did work that no one else would do. A lot of it went unnoticed, but the people that turned up there for this inconspicuous chap was very impressive. Just goes to show it's not what you do, it's why you do it. And that's what they talked about. It was quite real privilege to be there and be asked to speak at it. He'll be sorely missed. I just want to carry on with Taurus. I think if we don't already know, Taurus takes the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I mean that respectfully. Straight out of prison, no police checks, no drug tests, he just takes them. And if they proverbial it up, well, that's their loss. but he'll go into bat for them and hang in there and hang in there. So what he's achieved, even though his negotiation may be a bit unreasonable at times, but what he's achieved deserves a flippant knighthood as far as I'm concerned. He goes where angels fear to tread at times, and not many will do that. So, and the other thing is too, I'm now the chairman at the prison, and also involved in the youth courts, and we got youth coming there now, just like the ones. They just have no idea. They're brown on the outside, but they're all kaleidoscope on the inside. They just haven't got the faintest idea. And for you to revisit that, visit that with them, they would have been, what the hell is this? You know? And it is important. You are quite right. You imagine if you're told off, like happened in youth court the other day. Did you know your great-great-great-grandfather was an All Black? Straight away, you just see the shoulders go back and down. Yeah, so it's very, I think whatever the pastoral care is, it should come down heavy on the whakapapa. I really do. And take the family with you. You can't work with the young person in isolation. You've got to involve the entire family. Yeah, thank you.
Kia ora, and if I can through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, you know, Taurus, I think he is a Flaxmere hero. You know, he's a hero. We put him up on a pedestal. The other thing that I want to acknowledge, though, is that we got lots of heroes in our communities. So people I got to meet through this, still being relatively new to Hastings, like Tim Dodge at Dodge Contracting. There are people that Darren at Downer that are really committed to this kaupapa, and I think it is about the partnership. And I know Councillor O'Keefe, you know, you've been connected with Taurus forever, you know, and it's the ongoing partnership. It's the fact that very shortly we're about to have the top line graduation ceremony back in the chamber. Taurus about to do the next stage of launching his civil trainings academy, because I think the other strategy piece of work that is underway, but will be for the next council to deal with, is what is the next strategic pivot around how we think about procurement. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and we've started, you know, on a small scale with some of this progressive procurement, but when we think about the forward pipeline, the hundreds of millions of dollars that Hastings, the over $1 billion that the 4 councils in Hawke's Bay are planning to spend in the next 10 years, how do we change our approach to market and really think about what we want to achieve for that investment, other than just the physical water infrastructure or roading infrastructure, because I think that's where the big change comes. And again, if I'm reflecting back some of the things that Councillor Barber, as chair of the iwi and mana whenua are reflecting, is where you can set some other objectives. If we want to address Māori disparity, Paharakiki Trades Collective, Councillor O'Keefe's a classic example. Well, you're going to set some objectives about the spend going on growing Māori enterprise, funding apprenticeships. That's where the dial can really be turned from a strategy point of view. And so that work's underway. Craig Thu and the team are leading some really good work about what our approach to market is, how we might move from a project-based procurement to a multi-year pipeline of work, partnerships with firms, whether they be national or local, around giving certainty of pipeline. Because part of what reflects back, whether it's Taurus or Tim Dodge or even the big guys in town, is saying, you know, we're committed to this and taking on apprentices, but the investments that we need to make as businesses, the big costs around you know, investing in new civil rollers and kit and taking on people and long-term commitment to people around apprenticeship. You know, the challenge back strategically is, well, what are you guys bringing to the table? Are you prepared to enter into a longer-term partnership and a different approach that isn't just about on a project-by-project basis? So that is also, in addition to the other things we talked about, I think the strategic considerations.
Kia ora. Good comments, good feedback, and good to see the great work achieved through that Jobs for Here Taonga. We have recommendations on page 14. Can I get a mover, Tan, seconder, Councillor Lawson, Eileen. I'll put that. All those in favour, keep my eye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Thank you. Item 6, quarterly activity monitoring report. Raoul, kia ora.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll take the report as read. I would like to make a few remarks and then happy to take any questions. And it's kind of a nice segue. I think some of the early discussion definitely has flow-ons and synergies with what I'm about to emphasise here. So just the things I'll talk through, just the quarterly snapshot, which we normally attach to the report. Unfortunately, at the time of writing the report, Mr. Clues was still waiting on some external information, so that's come in now, and that will be presented or tabled at the District Development Committee on Tuesday and will be circulated to the rest of the council that day as well, so that's coming, so watch the space, I guess, is the flag there. In terms of the rest of the report, so just some highlights in terms of activity. So residential activity obviously still remains high. It's still very, very active across the district. You know, we've got a number of residential fronts in progress, both from doing the proprietary works and civil works to actual home construction. So Lyndhurst is very much active in its final stages. Howard Street, I don't know if you've been past Howard Street in recent times, but the civil works have commenced there in Howard Street, so that's a big milestone step forward. Brookvale's obviously very much in progress, and Iona Havelock Hills is in the consenting phase. I've got to mention my beloved Flaxmere because I've got the reason to do so. So obviously activity is very much progressing at pace between HDC's land holdings and also the Taiwhenua's development there. And again, I think that the point I'd make there is that the changes to the housing market that are happening at the moment will become more evident over the next 6 to 12 months, exactly what they mean. But as it stands currently, and we're still getting approached weekly from developers, that the market is still very, very buoyant in that space. Industrial activity highlights. So again, for Irongate, so there's been a number of sort of ongoing consents that have come in, so significant developments. Again, I'll just highlight a few. So for those councillors who are here when we unlocked the Irongate development, so Sunfruit was the key that unlocked the Irongate industrial zone. So they have just put in the earthworks consent for stage 2 of their development. So that's, it's gone kind of full circle there. And obviously we've got a whole lot of activity going on the Tumu site there as well. In terms of Amahu Road, again, largely most of the capital works there, the substantive works are now complete. So again, that's a bit of a milestone step there. And again, activity remains really, really strong there. You would have come across a lot of the stuff again when you did your bus trip, but the Foodstuffs North Island Distribution Centre is being constructed out there. We've got a number of cool stores being constructed. TR Group servicing and logistical sites being established out there, and also some of the existing local businesses are expanding. So again, emphasise the comments that were made by the Chief Executive and by the Chair. Hastings is going gangbusters and there's still a hell of a lot of activity there. So happy to take questions.
Councillor Nixon, kia ora.
Apologies for lateness, Chair. I'm particularly interested in item 1.54, your comments there, talking about what seems like, and you alluded to it a minute ago, a sort of slight reduction in residential building. I just wanted you to throw a bit more light onto that. I'm confused because one minute we're going gangbusters, and yet on here we're saying that the wrong paragraph. It's the one where we talk about the reduction in house building. Yeah, 1.5. It was 1.5.4. My eyes wouldn't focus quickly enough.
I guess I'll put a caveat on my comments, and I might bring Mr. Clues up as well, because the quarterly report is his area of specialty. But I guess that's the comment I'm making, that we are watching the market. It is changing, and the exact details that will come to fruition in the next 6 to 12 months. What we're finding is that the level of interest there is still really high, but obviously there is a reflection of that the activity is perhaps cooled a little bit. But Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Mr. Clues?
I guess the first thing I should say is that while the quarterly reports are very interesting, one quarter does not make a summer. And we do get normal fluctuations and we get unexpected fluctuations, just the way that the business operates. So you'd want to see 2 or 3 quarters of a trend before you said, oh, things are not going so well. So this comes off, while Q4 last year was about the same, came off a really big Q3. So there was a lot of consents issued in Q3. So it could come just down to the capacity of the industry dealing with a big spike. Means that there's a bit of a slow period afterwards, so we might see that return yet. There's a whole bunch of factors in there. So don't get too worried just yet, is my advice.
Are we standing orders?
No, you don't need to.
It's just, it just concerns me a little because, it's such a driver of unemployment, the item that we've just had. And so I just hope that we're really keeping our eye on that and knowing exactly what's going on, because I would want us to be warned as early as any trends become possible. But hopefully nothing will go there. So
if I can through you, Mr. Chair, I think that the key point's already been made is, that the reason that this comes every quarter to the council meeting is that we're monitoring all of this. We understand why this is important. We need to watch for trends. It's not a trend at the moment. It's simply an observation that Q4, coming off a peak, was, lower than what we've seen previously. So your point's absolutely right, Councillor Nixon. We need to watch this closely, as this council does. But there's also plenty of signs in the market still, with resource consents coming in the door for industrial, the things that we're seeing from big developers like CDL pushing the go button, big time on new developments like Iona, when we've got in the context of our recent history that you know better than me, we have got record levels of available land, and yet we've still got developers coming in and accelerating new developments. So they're, from my mind, headline indicators that there's still quite a lot of confidence in Hastings. But we do need to watch the things that are at play now in terms of cost of living, increasing inflation, changing financing in the banks. What that means for first home buyers are all things that we're going to need to watch closely over the coming period.
Well, if there is any change that we are, is the cause of interest being more than...
Yes, I think the other thing just to point out is that, and this came up in the other quarterly reports, that there was a big spike in consents issued for greenfield subdivisions that would come to the market over the course of this year, probably in the second half to the third half. So while there might be a little bit of a lack of supply at the moment, but might be just holding back this quarter, there's a big bow wave of sections coming through. So, and you'll see those in quarters unfold.
All right. Moved by Councillor Nixon, second, Your Worship. I'll put that, all those in favour, give my eye. Any against? Carried, thanks, Raoul. Item 7, Ross, Regional Spatial Strategy and Related Matters, and then Future Growth Management. Item 7.8.
Kia ora tātou, Mr. Chairman, Committee, thank you. I won't speak to the report for too much, take it as read, just a couple of comments regarding the Regional Spatial Strategy. You'll recall the Collaboration Day on the 7th of March agreed to undertake a scoping report. That work is now being commissioned and will be completed due in November of this year for the incoming councils to consider with the other spatial planning partners from the government, and also our iwi tangata whenua partners at that time. You've noted, Mr. Chairman, in your earlier comments the importance of that partnership, and particularly the partnership with iwi mana whenua, and that will be reflected in the work done to prepare the scoping report. There will be engagement that happens about what the appropriate engagement, governance and resourcing processes are as part of the overall scoping of the project. And the report also just notes the other related statutory processes, the Kotahi plan that the Regional Council needs to complete, and also the future development strategy, which has been the subject of comment already. Those are important building blocks for the regional spatial strategy, but will have to happen ahead of the spatial strategy given the timelines for those projects. So I don't really have much to add. I think the report provides an update, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, councillors? No? Oh, Councillor Strong.
Thank you. Not a question, but a comment, if that's all right. Just like to thank officers for the report and the clear way in which it's laid out all the influencing documents and processes that need to happen in conjunction with this. Doing a regional spatial strategy is not something that can be done in isolation and banged out quickly. So thank you for that continued messaging and continued explanation. And I support the continued good works. So happy to move the recommendations.
My way e tuarua. Who will second the report? Councillor Dixon. If there's no other comments, I'll put that. Those in favour, let's receive this report. Ki mai ai. Any against? Motion carried. Thanks, Ross. We'll just move them straight into the next one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is sort of a high-level overview of the broader future growth work programme that notes just a few of the other bits of work going on. Obviously, a key part alongside looking at where development capacity can be accommodated in the future development strategy will be the servicing of that development in those areas from infrastructure and the funding of that infrastructure. So that is a key focus of the work that we're doing at the moment. And again, happy to take any questions on that. We had, and later on in the agenda and the workshop yesterday on the medium density strategy review is again another key component that's starting to come together of Council's approach to providing development capacity. And noting on the 5th of July, there'll be some workshops to look at the business capacity assessment and, if required, some medium-term options for industrial land capacity. So I won't touch too much on that, but again, happy to answer any questions on any matters.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to say, I know that that's something that's been very important for the council. So just to acknowledge that's, that's coming for you to consider, because as we've talked about alongside the housing capacity assessment was the business capacity assessment and your clear direction to identify some alternative. So I'm pleased that work's been done, and you'll see that on the 5th of July.
Oh boy. Councillor Watkins.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Question to Mr. McLeod, or maybe to Mr. Thu. Just in the recent workshops, and again reinforced today, the relationship between higher residential development and the ability of infrastructure to cope with that development. Is it possible, Craig, that we could have a very bare, simple map of all the Hastings residential areas, and on that map show the underground infrastructure and its current capacity? Because obviously if areas, all our underground infrastructure is 100% maxed out, you'd say, well, if you're going into that area, you're going to have to provide a whole new investment package for infrastructure. But if there are other areas that are perhaps 75% capacity, would you then say, should we be looking at those areas first? And I've never seen a simple, clear diagram, and perhaps that's a big ask, but can you understand what I'm trying to say? If we had that in front of us, that would be a useful tool.
I'll make some opening comments and then hand to Mr. Thu and Mr. McLeod, because I think the question that you're raising is the very reason that we now have a future growth unit, and why we're understanding in terms of doing the spatial planning, forward development strategy, where can we intensify, that it all links to having to take an integrated view to this planning. And as we've talked about in recent workshops, there's no point in identifying areas for increased intensity if the infrastructure that we've got there is not going to cope with that. So it is how we integrate our planning for growth with, essential services planning, infrastructure planning, and I think an important element out of the medium density strategy, also a holistic view around community amenity, and that is the task for the team in terms of being able to present that picture. I'll let Craig and Ross comment on whether any such comprehensive picture exists today.
Through you, Chair. Very topical, Councillor, thank you. So after yesterday's workshop, officers had a first conversation which they'll be carrying on around how do we communicate these areas that are more restrictive than others. I don't think it will be down to this individual pipe or this individual element, because it's not necessarily just the asset. It might be an asset a K down the road that's the problem. So there's a micro and a macro issue. So without getting into making this confusing, I think zones where there's development potential and zones that there's limited development potential is the direction of travel around communicating that. And we have had these in the past. Councillors may remember where we had embargoed area in parts of Havelock North where we were restricted. And so we mapped up and showed on maps which areas where we had no wastewater capacity, for example. Years gone by, Norton Road, and for those who have been in the Bay long enough, there were whole areas around that Norton Road Park Road where stormwater was embargoed until Riversley Drain by the Regional Council got deepened and widened. So the team are working on to, I think the key point of your question is easily being able to communicate, be it via a map or other means, and consistent communication both internally but also with all of our applicants and property owners. So it may not be to the pipe level, but we are definitely looking at a spatial representation of what's developable or not, and that's absolutely in Mr. Chapman's purview under Mr. McLeod.
Yeah, just to add to that through you, Mr. Chair, I think Craig's comment there that there is both a macro picture and a micro picture is what I just want to expand on, and Craig sort of covered that. But we know, as we've said over the last sort of 6 months, that we are coming to the capacity of the Hastings wastewater system overall. We have capacity at the treatment plant, we have capacity in the pipes getting to the treatment plant, but it's getting it through Hastings, the way the system's designed, we're reaching the capacity levels for that at a macro level. Then you come down to the neighbourhood level or the suburb level, as we talked about yesterday with the workshop looking at some of the issues around Akina. There are particular potential network constraints. There are particular issues around low-lying areas. Anything on the south side of the hump, that concept of having to pump up and over. Those are all issues that play into micro issues that we may need to address. So the program we're developing, I don't think we'll ever get you quite a simple picture, but certainly the modelling work that's going on between Craig's team with Brett's input is showing those areas where we have macro constraints and showing areas where we need to provide macro solutions and where we need to provide micro solutions. So you'll see alongside the bigger pipes we're proposing, the one along the expressway, the sort of Karamu Road outlet, linking, providing more capacity to link into the main interceptors, and then you'll see us coming back with a series of connector sort of infrastructure to connect areas up to those and create more capacity at the micro level. So that's really the picture. We can look at how we get a diagram that shows some of that modelling outcome. I just note that my sidekick, Mr. Chapman, isn't in the room at the moment, but that work is going on between Craig's team and my team, not just in wastewater, that's probably the key constraint, but also in some of those other services as well, as we look at things like extraction limits and how we move water around more efficiently.
And with our partners like
Yeah, and with our partners, such as Unison, as Mr. Thu has said.
All right. Any other questions? Not? If not, I'll get a mover and a seconder for the recommendations on page 27. Tanya, seconded by Anne. All those in favour, keep my eye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Thanks, Ross. Build up. Right, let's move down to item 9, the medium density housing strategy review, and it's going to lead us off. And we also have Craig on Zoom. Kia ora, kōrua.
Kia ora Chair, kia ora councillors, staff, thank you. Happy to take the report as read, just a couple of very quick comments from me, and if you do have questions, we of course have our consultant Craig Batchelor online, and also many members of our project team across council here as well, so from planning through to strategic projects as well, if you have any sort of technical questions. I just want to comment and pick up on some remarks made at the workshop yesterday. So Craig Batchelor, myself and the project team have spoken regarding some of the questions about community engagement. So that will be something that we would like to focus on and include some more comments on in the report while it's still draft, before it goes out to some of the developers, the 8 to 10 developers that Craig engaged with, so that we can start building up how we will engage with the community regarding this. And also to Councillor Watkins, you might be interested, there's a recommendation in the report of including a portal for infrastructure information that developers have actually called for. So that's something that if you wish to endorse the draft recommendations, council could look at introducing as a information source for that kind of information you're talking about. And I understand the Chief was also wanting to do a quick introduction remark to the report as well.
Thank you. Got me out. Yeah, no, look, I mean, obviously the medium density strategy review that you directed us to undertake by the middle of this year, incredibly important in our context of how we, in an area where there's increasing pressure on our land resources, protect our Heretaunga plains, whilst also provide for, if you think about our housing capacity assessment, where 7,000 additional households need to be constructed in the next 10 years, we're going to have to get into doing intensification, whether it's in brownfields or greenfields, at a much different rate than we have been since we've had a medium density housing strategy that was adopted in 2014. I think the report sets out really clearly a set of actions, both immediate and through the development of the FDS across the normal levers that we have, regulatory, funding, financing, DCs, and I think represent a pretty solid body of recommendations about how we take this forward.
Ka So we had a good workshop around this yesterday, but any questions or comments from the council, Your Worship?
Kia ora, and thank you for this great work, and I did enjoy the presentation from Craig, the consultant, yesterday. For me, this has fundamentally changed from where we started, and while things go in staged processes and move and grow as our communities grow, but this is going to be one of the most significant pieces of work that our council needs to undertake. And I'm very pleased to see those local area plans, because what we thought for brownfields around our parks and reserves was good in theory. In practice, it's not something that our developers are looking at to do. So if we look at our medium density and learn from what has happened to what could happen, we need to rethink this whole process, how we're going to achieve the results that we're trying to achieve, and that is medium and higher density ways of living, but in a quality of life with that overview. So I think those local area plans excite me. I think they're going to be significant, and I think that, while we can have a process and a strategy, It's the buy-in from the development community, and as Landmarks has said all the way along in the last 6 years, we need to do this better than we have, and because what we call is infill, which you could call higher density, you could call it more density, infill, and that hasn't been as successful as we have set out to achieve, and we have to reflect on that and work out what we can do differently. So I'm excited by this piece of work. I'm excited about the next stage, and those city living zones and things like that and the changes to the district plan to enable higher density, where it should be, how we bring the amenity value through. That's got to be a very, very important focus for us. So, kia ora, thank you for this work. I really appreciated the workshop yesterday.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Chair. And echoing Her Worship, thank you for the work that's gone into this. This is probably one of the most exciting pieces of work that's happened in my short time on council, because this is how we ensure sustainability of housing, but also our economy in the future. This is essential. We actually kind of needed it yesterday, so it's great to see the momentum with which this is being pushed forward, and also to have a plan, I think, for the huge range of changes that have to take place in order to enable what we're trying to do here. And I think I said it yesterday, but I'd like to say it here again today. This will be new for our district, but this is not new in a global sense or even a national sense. We have to preserve our land, and the way we do that is looking at increasing intensification, but as Her Worship has said, with a real focus on quality and looking at how we can ensure that our community still has access to green space and all the things they love about our district. But it does mean change, and I'm really heartened. Thank you for the comments you've made around engagement, because that's going to be critical. Our community has to come on this journey with us. Not only to understand its necessity, but also to feed into what they think we need in order to make this viable. So acknowledge the work, and very happy to move or second the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sears.
Kia ora, Chair. Thank you. That was a great workshop yesterday. It was really exciting to see how much work's being done, and I really note the those further steps, assessing the operational impact of implementing, which is going to be the big next step, and going to be really critical for us to find resourcing to do that, because, as we've heard, it's so important. But really want to comment on the fact that we're going to talk about the community aspect, which I think is critical, because it's not just getting the development community will get on board if there's demand, so it's kind of a little bit chicken and egg, and it's really going out to our community and showing them how fabulous medium density or high density can be. I don't know if you're all disappointed or relieved I've stopped sending you amazing photos of 3D earth rammed, houses in the middle of cities or not, but you may have noticed I've stopped sending. But there are some incredibly inspiring and uplifting, and I think that's a real role for us, is to really inspire some leadership around these different ways of living. They're out there. It's not, let's all get excited about living in 8-story, buildings. It's a whole different way of viewing things. So I think it's important that not only we're telling the community, but we're also taking something to inspire them around some different opportunities. So I'm really thrilled and to hear that that's being picked up. Thank you.
And can I just say quickly, I guess that that engagement can actually start from this report. We don't have to wait. We can start engaging and telling the community about what Craig Batchelor's work has sort of shown us. So I think that would be a really good first step.
All right, Simon.
Thanks. I just asked this question yesterday, and when I got home, I thought, I'm not sure that I actually understood the answer properly, because it sort of impacts on the spatial plan that we were talking about earlier this morning. It's regarding retirement homes, which are a form of intensification, quite intense, but they do require large chunks of land. And what I started thinking about, I thought, does this plan actually allow that in there somewhere? Because there's nowhere much, we've done St Albans Street, there's almost nowhere I can think of that you could put that intensification in
and get the result we want. Yeah, Ryman filled up in what, about a year or less? I mean, there's huge demand. I just wonder where it fits into our thinking.
I'll make an opening comment that would be, I think both the nature that we have an ageing population, two, we're an attractive place to live, and many people are coming here, including people that are heading into retirement. Yes, we've got Ryman's, but we're aware of a large number of retirement villages that already have acquired land. For the considerable development over the medium to long term in Hastings. I can think of three major, acquisitions of land for the purposes of retirement village. I think that there are opportunities, in either a CBD or greenfields context. And as we talked about yesterday, I think that the standards that the council sets around making sure that the land that's being either redeveloped or new land that's being used is giving us the most efficient return we can get are some of the choices that this report highlights for you to make sure, because I don't think there's any issue around that. There's plenty of opportunity for retirement villages, but making sure that we're actually getting the most efficient return we can as just one of a number of considerations that I think this strategy highlights for you as councillors.
It seems to me, they tend to come up as a sideshow, whereas in fact, I don't know what percentage of people are living in retirement villages, but it must be growing. And I just feel somewhere in either our housing intensification or somewhere, it needs to start getting its own mention. That's the sort of thing I'm trying to say. Because to me, as you say, it's growing, it will keep growing. You apparently can't get a place in most of them now, Mary Doyle and all the rest of it. And I just feel that we need to be giving specific attention to that part of the intensification system.
No, good comment, councillor. And in terms of this report, we've got
Councillor Sean's moved.
Councillor Sean's moved the report, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Ka pai, put that. All those in favour, keep my eye. Any against? Report carried. Thank you. So, so councillors, those first numerous reports anyway were about the growth of Hastings, and there's a huge amount of work going on with that future growth unit. They've all just walked out, but kia ora koutou.
Getting on with dealing with it.
Yeah. But there's a lot of work going into the growth of Hastings, our district. So kia ora tātou. Okay, we're going to move into our subcommittee reports. Item 10, our first report is from the Great Community Subcommittee. Councillor Lawson, you happy to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Take the report as read. I think probably the things that I'd like to comment on is that the Great Communities Subcommittee continues to have a big work stream that is being worked through at the moment. We receive obviously regular updates via our committee meetings, and we touch on those 5 priority areas. Yes, and the work programme has been recently updated on the Hub, if anyone would like to look at it. Unfortunately, we have the timing is a little bit askew for this meeting because we have a meeting on Tuesday, and there are a number of reports, as you can see in this report here, that will be coming to the Great Communities Committee. Some reviews that will be seeking approval for endorsement at the next Strategy and Policy Committee. So those reports are a revised joint smoke-free and vape-free policy, the Tipahui Community Plan, the Community Plan Kite, and the Community Engagement Framework. So they will be coming to the committee on Tuesday and for further endorsement by the Strategy and Policy Committee. So, that's it. So happy to take any questions that I'm sure that either myself or Rebecca will be able to answer.
Any part-time councillors? No? Happy with the report? Cool. You happy to move that, Councillor Lawson? Seconded by Councillor Dixon. I'll put that, all those in favour, key my eye. Any against? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Lawson and your team and your subcommittee. Kia ora. Right, item number 12. No, item number 11. District Development Subcommittee, Councillor Sholem. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. And thank you also to the officers who do a wonderful job of putting together these reports for us. As is the case with Councillor Lawson, the next district development meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday, so we've included within the report an overview of what will be covered at that meeting. I will take the rest of the report as read as well. I'd just like to highlight that the last planned district development meeting did not go ahead. The main reason behind that was where everything sat in the work stream, it was surplus to requirements, and we didn't want to waste anyone's time unnecessarily, especially because there is so much work going on at the moment. So the meeting we have on Tuesday is where we'll be getting an update on everything. Because so much of what's covered by district development actually gets reported on in strategy and policy, I won't labour through the things we've already gone through. The only thing I will note, which is not actually directly something that Hastings District oversees, but the My Way service, which we mentioned last time and that the Regional Council came and presented to District Development on, is now up and running. If you haven't tried it already, I highly recommend you do. I tried it out last Friday. Very efficient, seeing really great use. Had a really good chat to a number of the drivers, and they're thrilled with how it's going as well. This is the future of public transport as far as I see it, and this is also what enables the intensification we're talking about in the future as well. We need good public transport like this. If anyone has any questions, very happy to answer, or I'm sure Lee, who's here, will help me as well.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem. Any part-time?
Through you, Chair, just a question on the parking master plan, and was that coming back through district development, the workings of the report?
So we are getting an update on that on Tuesday, so I'll be able to give more information after that meeting. However, please rest assured, Your Worship, that is prodded at just about every meeting. So yes, it is a priority.
Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, and this is great, looking forward to this meeting. I'm wondering, this is a question to staff, can we please have an update on our highway investment? Because I heard on the radio and I've seen reported in media that the comparison of Hastings and New Plymouth to other cities that did not get the highways investment, we have a much more active community, and I'd love to have that report, the physical report, brought back through us so we can see and justify future investment in highways as opposed to myways.
An excellent idea. I will ask for that. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. And also just something that's not noted on the agenda for next week, we're also looking at the city centre strategy as well, and all councillors are invited to participate in that workshop.
Bye. Okay, so it's on Tuesday. All right, all invited to that one. You got another question? Done? Would you have your move seconded? Councillor Kerr, I'll put that, all those in favour, keep my eye. Any against? Carried. Kia ora. Koutou. Eco Districts Subcommittee, Councillor Redstone, kei a koe.
Kia ora, Councillor Barber. Yeah, I'll take the paper as read as well. As you can see, our work stream's growing very quickly. The RMPs were the big part of it over the last couple of months. We've been doing a lot of work. There's been some very robust discussion, and we'll look forward to seeing those a bit later on this agenda. We're forming some good relationships, as you can see, with Regional Council around water security and measuring carbon, Hawke's Bay Climate Action Groups, the Sustainable Farming Trust. So things are starting to move along as we'd hoped, and we feel like we're making some progress, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Oh, here we go. Councillor Nixon, kia ora.
Yeah, very simple. On 34, parking management plan, but when we talked about it to Eileen report just a few minutes ago, we were also talking about parking. How the two sleeve together? I mean, are we duplicating efforts or?
May I answer that, Chair? The district development and great communities subcommittees have lots of crossover points, and we work collaboratively together to make sure there's no duplication of work. So, but it might be that both subcommittees are keeping an eye on the work.
We need to communicate. I'm on one.
Happy to move.
The mover, seconder, councillor Sears. Put that. All those in favour, key my eye. Any against? Carried. Thank you, Echo Districts. Now to the item 13, District Planning and Bylaws. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and councillors. Everything in front of you is fairly succinct. I think it's ongoing. There's nothing new in there. I'll take it as read, but I will just like to report on 2 or 3 items. The plan change to implement changes required to protect the matters of cultural importance on Te Mata. All going well, that will come before the last council meeting of this triennium, for those who weren't at the workshop. So that will be, that'll be a major piece of work if we can get that completed and signed off. 22, the plan change to facilitate residential intensification. That will come before district plan and bylaws in September. The Kaiapoi and Lyndhurst Road extension structure planning. Consultants are being engaged at the moment to look at 3 waters, at transportation, at soil remediation, contamination. So that work is ready to proceed. And finally, you'll be pleased to hear this, Councillor Sholem, 34 parking management study. And that'll come back to my committee in October. So I'm happy to take any questions. If there's not, I'm happy to move the report.
If no questions? Okay, moved by Councillor, thank you for your report, Councillor. Moved by Councillor Watkins, seconded by Councillor Sears. I'll put that, oh, sorry, brother.
Thank you.
I'll put that. All those in favour, key my eye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Thank you. Item 14, Three Waters Reform and Transition Update. You got some opening remarks, Craig?
Can do. Yep.
Okay. Welcome, Carly.
Yeah. So, first of all, some of you would have met Carly Price, who, when she presented through at our Risk and Assurance Committee on our 3 water transition strategy. So Carly has been grateful, and it's been great to bring Carly on board to assist the team through this massive 3 waters transition kaupapa. Lots of work stream, lots of moving parts, particularly at this early stage, whilst the quicksand is still setting to be firmer concrete for us to operate on. So what we just wanted to do is largely take the report as read, but just a couple of slides if this clicker wants to behave for me. Yes. So in your report, we talked through some legislation and transition preparedness. So as a really high level, the chair talked about at the start. So Taumata Arawai, the drinking water regulator and environmental overseer, but primary focus at the start is the drinking water regulator. Last time we reported, they had their standards out for submissions. That process is closed. They have now formally released the new drinking water standards and the aesthetic values, and they are effective from the 14th of November. I guess high-level oversight, none of those cause us anything material to worry about. It's where we saw them. They have also issued that the new assurance rules, the quality and reporting rules, will also be effective from 14th of November, but they have yet to release the final document post the submissions. We are really lucky because both Mr. Chapman and Carly sit on technical working groups, so have a line of sight around the direction, and for our supplies, our line of sight is we're well dressed to meet those future requirements. In fact, from a personal perspective, I'm disappointed that they've gone a bit soft on some of the rules and left some of the things that the learnings of Havelock perhaps haven't been fully learned, and may cause some challenges in the days gone by. But that's a discussion we'll have with Te Mata Arawai. Personal position, not necessarily organisational position. The Water Services Entity Bill, which Carly will talk to on the next couple of slides, has been at its first reading in Parliament, and submissions on that process close on the 22nd of July. And our officer recommendation to you is that there are elements that this council should make a submission, be that a regional or our own council or both. There are a number of areas in there, which Carly will talk about on the next slide. In terms of transition preparation, at a national level, the National Transition Unit under DIA has a significant number of work streams that they have underway, that they're progressing in terms of designing up what they see needs to happen for the future entities, the 4 entities. But it's also fair to say that they're still shaping and adjusting and reshaping their plans and their resourcing for that. One of the pieces we talk about in the report is that the NTU has talked about funding to assist councils, but we still haven't got a line of sight of what that process is, how would we get access to that money and what that money can be used for. One of the groups that they do have, which is what they've called a local transition teams, there are acronyms for Africa through this, just like most parts of different government departments. We are now, and so what that is either chief executives or GMs of infrastructure from across each entity. So for us, Entity C are now meeting weekly to work through how the work requirements that we need to put in to make sure that Entity C and our staff and the systems are ready to keep the lights on up until the 1st of July 2024, but also make sure that the wheel doesn't stop after 2024. It's mentioned in the report, at the moment, obviously a lot of this is centrally led, but the success will be locally driven. So the region's chief executives and myself and my counterparts met with the NTU senior manager just to offer up an alternative approach around if in Hawke's Bay or Hawke's Bay East Coast we're largely aligned and there's some work for us to do as aligned to the Hawke's Bay case, is there a different way to move towards this process where we can work with our local mana whenua partners? And just at Hiratonga Takatanoa yesterday, we talked through and just the struggle our PSGs and the iwi have around working with multiple parties, and it's easier to do one discussion, not 6 discussions. So we offered up a different way and have left that on their table as a different way to do this transition planning where it's locally led rather than centrally driven. I'll just take got a question, Your Worship?
Just a comment when you're finished.
Okay. So just to the entity bill.
So it's at the select committee at the moment, and submissions are due on the 22nd of July. What the bill does is it's the first of 2 bills that are needed to set up the entities, and this one talks about the ownership, the governance, the accountability, and a lot of the transition arrangements. So a lot more details on things like economic regulators, and more details on how it ties in with planning legislation and things like that are coming in the second bill. They're talking about the second bill hitting Parliament in around September, which is unusual timing, I would have thought, but we'll see. They've said this type of legislation was going to hit, and then it hasn't necessarily come out at that time anyway, so we'll have to just watch this space. So what we've done at the moment is we've looked at the first bill, to see if there's anything that we think would be worthwhile making a bit of a submission on, keeping in mind that there are a lot of gaps that are hopefully going to be filled by the second bill. So one of the first issues is a governance issue, and that is, under the bill, there's a regional representative group, and this is the governance from the local authorities. This is the body through which the local authorities are going to have a governance aspect over the entities. And the regional representative groups has an equal number of mana whenua and local authority members, and it's between 12 and 14 members. So that would mean that there would be 7 members from local authorities. There are 21 local authorities in Entity C with 7 representatives. At the moment, the legislation doesn't outline anything to do with what those 7 representatives have to be in terms of who they have to represent or how they get selected, or even who is the one that's selecting them. It says the local authorities have to select them. So it's, and there's no requirement that they're not all from Wellington, for example. So ongoing, later on, the constitution of the entity will determine whether there's a regional representation requirement or something along those lines, but the first constitution won't be in place in time for the first regional representative group to happen. So that might be something that we want to highlight. The second area where the drafting doesn't quite meet what they were intending is that they have the requirement that the entity gives effect to Te Mana o Te Wai, and has a response to the Te Mana o Te Wai statements of the mana whenua for the entity's area. But when they've defined what Te Mana o Te Wai applies to, it's tied in with the freshwater NPS. So it doesn't actually theoretically cover coastal waters, like estuaries, oceans, that kind of thing. And so I don't think that was the intent of the drafting, but we might just want to point that out to them because the Y is the Y, it's all one Y, and we do have impacts on the coastal waters as well. Another smaller administrative minor issue is that in the establishment period, which is the time from when this becomes law until the handover, which is 1st of July 2024, in that establishment period, there are powers for DIA to be able to second staff, whether we offer them or not. And there are also powers for them to be able to say, no, you can't take out more debt to be able to fund more of the work that needs to happen if it's a water asset. Now, in practice, it's unlikely that they're going to deny things or take staff that we say we need. From a political perspective, we can definitely put pressure on them. But legally, they can require those things with no regard to whether we need either those staff or that money in order to keep the lights on until the last day. So that's something that we could potentially make comment on. In practice, we would be able to manage the risk, but it could be tidier. The final thing that we were going to recommend that we make a comment on is there's no obvious link at the moment in the legislation about requiring the entity to take consideration of what councils want in terms of growth. So the entity has to provide for growth. It's part of their objective, but they have to consult on where they plan on putting infrastructure, and they have to report back on how they responded to that consultation. But they don't actually have to listen to anything we say. In that, we could say we want growth in a new area, and if the water infrastructure was such that it wouldn't provide for that growth, we don't at the moment have any linkage there that would mean that we could say, you have to provide us that service. So we're hoping that the second bill has a little bit more information on that and is a little bit tighter on that, but we could make a comment on the first bill of the fact that that linkage is missing.
And I'll take the rest as pretty much read because this is referring to what was in the report, but yeah, there are many tentacles to this reform, so we have multiple work streams going to try and make sure that we deliver what we can for the right thing for HDC ratepayers by looking after the people, making sure with the business as usual we keep the lights on till the last day, making sure we put forward really good business cases with all of our with everything going forward, including having as many shovels in the ground on day one of the new entity so that things just keep going and we don't all of a sudden have 5 years where nothing gets built in the first 5 years of the entity like they did in Watercare up in Auckland. We'll make sure that doesn't happen. We're looking at different systems and influencing people, and also making sure that we're communicating out to the community what's going on so they can engage in this space in an educated way if they're interested too.
So, Your Worship.
Thank you for your report. And you've highlighted some very important parts, Carly, that need to be included in our submission. And that local representation, regional representation is absolutely key. And the future development strategies is absolutely key. How we align our strategies with this entity. I wouldn't like to think, I won't agree that the governance table needs to see that our submission, this is our one opportunity for Hastings Hiritonga. This isn't legislation yet. We've still got to put our best foot forward, how we look after our community through this whole process. So we've got less than a month to do this submission. It needs to be a regional submission. Regional leaders have agreed. It needs to also be Hastings District. But it needs to be making sure you capture some of the views of governance. So yes, we need to make sure on July 1st, 2024 that the lights are on and how the transition could work if the legislation goes through. But we need to be making sure that we are putting the strong voice through for our community, because that there is doesn't matter how much consultation we do to have your say Hawke's Bay, people still don't understand what this means to them. And that's what's most important, that people get to know, and how do we pick up their voice. Tomorrow outside here, there'll be a big hui with, I know a lot of people are coming in for it, but we need to capture that in a submission to make sure our community is well looked after for the future. So I would like to add to the recommendations that the governance table sees the submission and approves it before it's sent on the 22nd of July. There will be a lot of information at local government conference about this. That's at the same day that we have to have the submission in by. But it needs to be based largely on what has happened in the past, our regional model, and how we bring our community with us.
Right, we'll draft up that additional recommendation. We'll just go through the questions while we're doing that. Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something with Her Worship, because the recommendation B speaks about we delegate final approval to the Chief Executive. Are you happy that we see what I call a final draft? So that the Chief still can sign off the final change? It's just...
But we need to bring it back to the state.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it was just really around the recommendations, whether council sees the final draft. So you still have the ability to do the final tweaks to it, the typos, whatever feedback we give, and sign it and send it off.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to be a bit thick here, but as the key message from you, Your Worship, that you want the council table to approve the submission from Hastings District Council.
Yes.
Mine was to see the guts of it and not necessarily the final.
So what we're saying is the recommendation to delegate to me, I mean, you're putting on the table, Your Worship, that you actually want the Chief Executive to do the work, bring the submission here, and for the submission from Hastings District Council to be approved by the council.
Yes.
So we'll need to add a meeting for that to occur.
Yep. I think it's
Is there any
important.
meetings on the calendar?
That's my question too, because it says it's coming back before the 22nd.
It can be a strategy and policy.
It's in a meeting.
No.
Vivi?
Kia ora, Chair. Your Worship, are you saying that you want to remove the delegation, or we just need a workshop before that we can see the substance and make any comments or additions, but we can still leave the delegation with the Chief Executive, so we don't need to create another formal meeting to...
Well, I'd had a look in my diary, and I don't think there are any meetings, so we
Yeah.
have to be. And what's most important to me is that our community knows about our submission. So that is what's most important to me, Chair. That the community can say that Hastings have put forward a submission on behalf of the community. So whether we do that as an informal meeting, but somehow we need to be able to share that with our community.
So I'm just wondering if, what we get out of today, the direction, at one level in terms of what the bill is in front of Parliament and submitting back on that on behalf of Hastings District Council, if we're on the right track, we'll continue to prepare that submission. We can have a workshop or an informal council meeting, and at the point that the submission is made to the Select Committee, we can communicate and provide that submission to the public and ratepayers of Hastings, so they know what the submission that we've made. And then I think my sense is, Your Worship, that at a regional level, the thing that the regions probably want to continue to advocate is that none of us were advocating the status quo, but at a region we still believe the regional model delivers the benefits, and that's probably the basis for a regional submission. So if you're happy that satisfies your concern, that actually everybody around the governance table is cited having an opportunity to review the final submission, but that ultimately then I can sign that off, and that can all be made available to the public of Hastings.
All right. You happy with that, Your Worship? Yep. Okay. All right, we've got a few more questions.
I still have a question.
You still got a question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There was
okay.
a comment on that.
You go.
But I really needed to go back to the presentation where you listed those, I think, 4 or 5 points to submit on. So while they're looking for that, just to clarify, this is only the Service Entity Bill 1. It only includes this first section. There'll be the second one coming. Again, we will have the second opportunity for those. Right. So in this one, we can only speak on the next one, the next slide. Yeah, this one. So particularly, I'm just interested in the governance to make comment around representation for the 7 local governments. Yes, absolutely, that needs to be a strong submission. Are we not looking to make any comment on the same type of process for the 7 mana whenua, who I'm assuming are going to have a very similar issue? In fact, there'll be even more probably. Do we see that as part of our role to make comment, A, on how mana whenua will select, but also on, are we making comment at this stage on the division of the 14 into 50% of each? Because I know that's a real interest to our community, so I'd quite like to know how we're addressing that.
Well, I'll just comment from an iwi perspective. So all iwi up and down the length and breadth of Entity C we will meet, and no doubt we will meet a number of times to bed that down in terms of who will be sitting at the table, at the representation. What's it called?
Regional representation.
Yeah. So I wouldn't think that council would be playing a role in that side of it.
So will iwi be making their own submission to the process on that part of it?
Yep.
And so just to finish, so will we as a council be making comment on the structure of this governance board in relationship to its 50% representation? I'm not saying we even have a position, I'm just asking, is this the time to make comment on?
Well, I think the working assumption is that the position of this council and all of the councils in Hawke's Bay, and whilst we haven't got a Hawke's Bay model, the thing that we all agreed to, that wasn't the status quo, is that Three Waters would be managed in a co-governance model with iwi mana whenua. So I think that continues to be the position of the position of.
So will our submission reflect that? Or is it something we just won't address in either way?
So as with all submissions, if there are areas that the council fully supports and we don't want lost if there are counters, then we normally would say this is an area that this council in this region supports. So absolutely. And if I may, through you, Chair, just comment on, just in terms of the wider Water Services Entity Bill 1, we are already working with some of our key mana whenua partners around what we're seeing, because obviously they're resource strapped as well, so we're just sharing what we're both observing. So we pointed out that issue, that potential drafting issue, if I'm being kind, in the Te Mana Te Wai, because that's like a really critical element. It doesn't fit with any of the hui that we've been having with them around aspiration. So we'll continue to share at an officer level what we're seeing and what they're seeing to look to support each other as well, where there's natural crossovers. The other one I just want to clarify, yes, there is a second bill, but the second bill will be on other matters.
Yes.
So it's really important on the matters that are in this bill that we're clear on the council's position.
Yes.
What Ms. Bryce was talking about is there are things in there that we're not seeing that you might assume is in the next bill, but rather than assume, we want to make a comment on it now, just so you don't miss the boat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Watkins. Oh, sorry, I might jump to you. Sorry about that. Look, they say the dumbest question is the one that's not asked. So I'm going to ask the dumb question, which is an extension of that liability in the establishment period. Can I just understand, having talked about residential intensification, and if we select an area that we want brand new Three Waters infrastructure to go in, that's our work plan. If it was we were looking after it, we'd do it. In the new entity, if we put that work plan forward associated with the pressures of housing, and that entity decides that Palmerston's got a higher priority, what is the guarantee that we can still meet our work program? Do we have that ability, or does the entity have the ability to say, well, actually, Hastings, sorry, you're just going to have to wait?
Look, if I can, through you, Mr. Chair, and then I'll get Mr. Thu and Ms. Price to comment if they want. At a high, this is why we need to feed back on this, where we're looking to raise the issues. But at a broad level, the set of assumptions that we're working to is these entities are plan takers. They are not plan makers. We are the ones that are obligated in law on things that we're talking about. We have to furnish a forward development strategy in law that sets out where the growth's going to come, how we're going to ensure the supply of housing, plus a contingency of 20%, 3 years, 10 years, 30 years. All of that has to be, as we've talked about at this council, based in a strong evidential sort of basis. We have to consult on that plan and adopt it. They are a plan taker, but we have to clarify how these interfaces are going to work. So I'm sitting here and saying, if we have adopted, following a legal process that we're bound by, a forward development strategy that sets out clearly how the needs of our community is going to be met, how that growth is going to be managed, how we're going to meet the legislative obligations on us, then we need to absolutely understand, well, what does being a plan taker make in terms of the way then that's given effect to. So I guess what's being highlighted is that we're submitting on wanting to, ensure that we understand how that's going to work in terms of roles and responsibilities.
Nothing really further to add. The only thing we've heard so far, and it'll be a continuing conversation, is in the future spatial planning and that future growth, the water entities must be a member in those conversations, because there is the counter around going how practical in terms of order of delivery, in the same way we do that internally. But what we're looking to see is the locked and loaded, and to be fair, from being at the meeting with the LTT with other CEs and GMs from NTTC, the NTU and their technical people were told in no uncertain terms is we need to restart this because you're missing the point in this area. So we're pretty locked into heels as a local government sector in this space.
Oh boy, thank you for that. Thanks for that report. We have recommendations. Oh, Nick, go boy.
Thank you, Chair. Even I've got a question. Under the water suppliers' obligations, has there been any more work done on the private water providers on rural properties?
So it's still, so there was the Rural Working Group have released a report. Taumata Arawai, in terms of its rules for private supplies, and particularly smaller supplies, are reworking their acceptable solutions, which we reported to weren't that acceptable. And they're reconsidering some of the population thresholds. As it stands, if you think of the water services entities, the obligation that currently sits on council is if a private water supply got into trouble, Te Mata Arawai can tell us to go and help them. That would transfer to the water services entity, but Ms Price may have some further information.
I was just going to say, one clarification they've come out with in the last week is that they have changed the population thresholds. So 25 people and below are not required to install treatment or specific levels of treatment or follow those acceptable solutions, but they are required to do some monitoring and reporting. But they have introduced a new category for 25 people and under that has slightly less onerous conditions on it.
We should be able to get that off a website somewhere. Yeah,
I'll find you a useful link as opposed to the long-winded one. Yep.
Thank you. That would be really appreciated, and if, as an action point, that could be sent to the Rural Community Board. Thank you.
All right, I think we've traversed this paper enough. Anyone who's happy? Anyone happy to move the report? Oh, you go.
Yeah, sorry, just wondering where we've landed with the recommendations based on conversations around workshops earlier. Just checking on B. Keen to leave room for a formal council meeting not to have to be called.
That from my perspective, that's the way that it's worded. So I it's delegated to me to get it in on the timeframes that we need to. It has to come to council for approval. It doesn't mean a formal council meeting. It can be an informal meeting, a workshop. That the intent is that this council wants the opportunity to go through the submission that we're making. So I think it achieves the intent of the conversation that we've had.
If we're clear on that, I'm very happy to second Ms Sandra, who moved the recommendation.
Right, we've got a first and a seconder. I'll put that those recommendations. All those in favour, keep my eye. Any against? Carries. Kia ora. Item 15, funding applications for Flaxmere Park Skate Park. Kia ora, Rachel.
Kia ora tātou councillors. I will take this report as read and happy to take any questions. It's relating just to get authorisation for officers to apply for funding to fund shade sails and artistic elements for the Flaxmere Park skate park, as was required in a report that we took last year. Work has commenced on site and they're making really good progress. We're working with Iwi Toy for the design of the cultural elements, and we're still on schedule at the moment to complete that project in September or October.
Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can really understand the need for shade at the skate park. I think that's essentially and it's really important. What I can't come to grips with is the proposed source of funding. Last year, this council approved a sinking lid policy to reduce the number of pokie machines because of problem gambling. Now I find it quite ironic that this council is now applying for gaming funding gained through public pokie machines when 12 months earlier they were opposed to them. Is there other opportunities of gaining the funding like the Flaxmere Development Fund? I don't believe that pokie machines is the way to fund this.
The short answer from my perspective to the second question is yes, clearly, if you weren't of a mind to apply from to this trust for that funding, then there is the funding in the Flaxmere Development Fund.
Thank you.
Councillor Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I reflect on what Councillor Dixon's just said. It does seem to conflict with our views to seek funding from this area. However, I do stop and think of the harm that's been done within our community from pokies, and is it not correct that good should come out of that harm? So that's what I reflect on. This is something that our children need, our community needs, and a community that has been calling out for this for some time. And if this enables it and allows us to continue to do other good works with the reserve fund that we have, then I think we should do that. I'm really heartened that this council applied a sinking lid to pokies. We're moving in the right direction. We're not endorsing gambling in my mind by seeking funds from these sources. Instead, what we're doing is making sure that the funds that have been taken from our community in part are coming back. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as they stand.
Thank you.
Done.
I'm happy to second and just remind people that although we have the sinking lid policy, not all gamblers are problem gamblers. Some can manage with excess income. So I support this, and I really hope that we do get shade sales and art elements at our plaza. Be cool.
Yeah, I've felt somewhat hypocritical over the years. On one hand, I'm battling the scourge that's permeates throughout our community. On the other hand, I'm receiving monies. And if my mum knew I was doing that, she would do a triple somersault. And I understand where Councillor, and I do empathise with that. But I've sort of motivated myself to get over that. And I'm going to take this money when it's available and recycle it. There are many projects in Flaxmere, including our marae. The kitchen, is one example. If we didn't reach out to this source of funding, we'd be up the creek without a paddle. Until there's a better way, a better source. Yeah, Councillor Dixon, I'll keep doing that. Yeah. But don't hate me for it.
Am I allowed to make another comment?
Yeah, sure.
My comment is that that's a club, that's a marae, that's an organisation. The bit that I can't get my head around is it's council that's actually making the application. I don't mind if it's the Flaxmere Community Group that's making the application. It's the actual fact that council is making the application for gambling funding.
Do we apply often on, for funds?
You've got a motion on the table.
What's that? Yeah, Damon, kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora. You can hear me. I'm on the same line with Malcolm on this one. For the last number of years, we've reduced the number of machines, how much of an effect that's had when we've also got global online gambling, and none of that money comes back. And we've made the calls around our council table whereby, so I agree with Malcolm as well around another entity actually making the application. If there is an opportunity to do that, I'd much rather see that.
Go for it. Your worship.
Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for bringing it up, Malcolm. And you've swayed me. I'll go in behind you too on this one.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I do understand what Councillor Dixon is saying and Councillor Harvey. For me, there is such a shortage of funding out there at the moment. There are so many community organisations that are struggling to manage post-COVID. I just wonder, is there funds in the Flexmere budget that could pay for shade sales?
Yeah, yes, there is, as I mentioned earlier, Your Worship. So through you, Mr. Chair, we've got a couple of things at play here. So we're seeking the approval for two funding applications. One is to a trust that's associated with its revenue through gambling. One is to the First Light.
Both are, Chief.
Are they both?
Yes, they are.
Okay, right.
So,
sorry,
but the first one, Trust House, the funds have to be used in Flexmere.
Right, so they're both gambling. Okay.
Yes.
So the short answer is, if you chose to not make applications there, and we're talking about $50,000 for shade sale, there is currently $3 million sitting in the Flexmere Town Centre account. So I mean that's that's the choice for council. If we don't apply for external funding, you're using the funding that is in the Flexmere Town Centre account.
Mm-hmm. Go for it. There's an option. Councillor Sears.
Just a question, thank you, Chair. Will the shade sales be owned by council or be a council asset? Thank you.
Okay, so we've got an option. Who moved the motion? Do we have a second for the motion? Oh, you, Tan?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Deal with put that to the.
we'll put that to you both.
Yep.
In terms of where the funding comes from. All right. Those that support the funding being sourced from the application to the trust, raise your hand. To mai tōringa, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that? Oh. Oh, yeah, Alan.
Do it again, just to be clear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that's carried.
Motion's carried. Kia ora.
Through your chair, I think that one thing that the mover and seconder may not have considered, if the council is unsuccessful in achieving the $50,000 from these two gambling sourced funds, then we need to have provision for them the officers to come back here, because the last thing we want is for our Flexmere community to miss out on shade sales. So I think you need to think about adding something or adding in because that needs to, we can't hold up the project.
So could I suggest then, as the Chief Executive, that you could have an additional recommendation that said, should the applications be unsuccessful in whole or part, that you authorise the Chief Executive to meet those costs or balance from existing budgets?
Yes.
you know. Excuse me.
I'm loving this. I'm dropping.
We'll just have a cup of tea break, people. We'll recess the meeting, and we'll pick it up when we get back.
Can I just make a...
You can come back at quarter past.
Yeah, I'll make a comment.
Oi, oi, oi.
Order, please.
Order.
Yeah, I'm on a number of charitable trusts, and what I've seen over the last couple of years is where trustees on those trusts have submitted for sinking lid or reduction in pokie machines, etc. Those trusts have been blacklisted for funding from gambling trusts. So I think the Mayor's recommendation is actually very valid.
So we'll have a break, 10-minute break, people, and then we'll pick this up at quarter past. Yep. Let's go, let's go, let's go. All right, guys, we'll go back online and restart up the meeting. What's the word for that? Reconvene the meeting. Goodbye. So, Anne, did you want to have a quick kōrero before I give a summary of where we got to on the last paper? Yeah, no, we're not there yet. So we're on item 15, eh?
Yeah.
To apply or not to apply.
Yeah. So we had a vote. It was voted to continue to make the application, yeah? And we're going to do that, I think.
Yeah, so, but I think that the conversation that you've had as a councillor and a good healthy debate is the issue that's being raised, I think, in the context of both Councillor Dixon raising the question about whether council should be applying in the context of our policy position on sinking lid and gambling. I think raises a policy question that officers should bring back to strategy and policy, is saying, do we want that to continue to be our position that we can make applications to such trusts? And I think the other issue that Her Worship raised, which is also pretty important contextually, at a time when funding for communities has probably never been more in need and contested. I think the policy question is what is our position as a council about applying to trusts for funding, and so I think the view is to leave the decision that was put forward with a mover, a seconder and passed, leave it on the table, and officers to bring back to the next strategy and policy committee the broader question about what our policy position as council should be. And we will await, as we always do, if the outcome of the application is unsuccessful, we will bring to you the options around how clearly the importance of having shade sails in Flaxmere Park gets funded if we, depending on the outcome we get from the application.
Okay. You're over there. Wendy, you've got a...
So just to 100% clarify, so the motion that was put and passed, that's going to be actioned.
Yes.
The second body of work that's going to happen is to bring back...
the council's policy position on this, and then depending on what comes out of the applications as it relates to Flaxmere Park shade sails, we will get an outcome one way or the other, but we will obviously deal with and ensure that the substantive thing is that the Flaxmere Skate Park needs shade sails occurs.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask that my vote be recorded against the recommendations? Thank you.
Good point. All right. Okay, our last agenda item is item 16, and just to acknowledge it, it's been through eco districts, and you'll get a kōrero. I'll give the first introduction to Rachel, but it's been through eco districts, rural community board, and we also have had a council workshop. Yeah? on these papers. And so we've had plenty of discussion. Hey, and this is just to take this out to consultation with the community. So that's the backdrop. Rachel, you can kick it off, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to request from the committee to adopt these 3 draft reserve management plans for consultation purposes. I would just firstly like to acknowledge my colleague Alex Maben, who is the author of the Frimley Park Reserve Management Plan. And I'd also just like to acknowledge the consultants, Rebecca Ryder, who is with us online at the moment from Boffa-Miskell, who is the consultants that have led the Tainui, Tauroa, Tana, Hikanui and Keith Sands Grove Reserve Management Plan, together with a close partnership with Mare Epatu and Dr. Anthony Coles from Taiwhenua. We've strictly followed the legislative requirements of the Reserves Act in the preparation of these plans, which required us 18 months ago to advise the community that we were intending to prepare these plans. And then we have to take into account all of the feedback that we have received. I've outlined in the report the amount of feedback that we've received on all of these plans, and consideration's been given to all of that in the preparation of these draft reserve management plans. If they are adopted today, it's our intention to publicly notify their availability for formal submission on the 2nd of July. And the Reserves Act requires us to put that out for 2 months for formal submissions. We have discussed it as well, but given a desire to hear the submissions received or to hear any submissions received before the end of the year, and given timings with local body elections, we are recommending that the submissions be heard by full council, and that occurs in November. So those reserve management plans can look to be adopted before the end of the year. And we've just got one amendment to one of the recommendations. So while Lynn's bringing that up, we go to questions or comments.
Thank you, Baden. Well, I'm thinking that we've had such a robust process, we shouldn't need any questions, I'm hoping, because they've all been asked and answered in the past. So I'd like to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that you and Alex have both put in, and the team, Rachel, and also thanks to Focal for the initial consultation with the community and asking what they wanted, and Hawke's Bay Archaeology as well with Hikanui Pa. So yeah, and also everyone you mentioned, so you did take the words out of my mouth, and thank you for that. I don't think there's anything much to add, except I'd take the report as read and remind everyone we are adopting the plans, which are now community consultation documents. So leave it there. And I'd like to move the recommendations. Thank you.
Right, we have a mover, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Councillor Scholem.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarification, given the timing that this will come back to council, the new council, after it's gone out for consultation, and the budgets and the timing of the budgets included in the draft plans will be something for their consideration. Is that something they will go through in that hearing process, is it? I just want to make sure we're not backing future councils into a corner. Fantastic. And again, like Councillor Redstone, I'd just like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this, and also acknowledge the community for participating in all its forms, and really invite them to participate in this next step as well. You know, in the end, this is us going out with a plan, and we're really looking forward to hearing what they have to say coming back before the future council decides what happens.
Councillor Sears.
Kia ora, Chair. I'd also like to appreciate the consultation that was done with our independent survey company. I think that was a really important part of this, to be able to, as a council, take that independent survey work and hear from our community in a way that we know was very independent, and that we could prepare these plans having heard the community voice and put it out for now, as Councillor Scholem says, to get the community back in to look at what they told us they wanted and can tweak it as they see fit. So I think that was a great decision, and it served us really well in the preparation of these plans.
Okay, we have amended recommendations. Do you want to just explain?
So we just amended the recommendations just to make it quite clear in recommendation B and C that you are adopting the draft reserve management plans as attached in the relevant attachments, just so there's no ambiguity there. And with recommendation D, we're having to make a change to page 73, and I think we've handed out the amendment. All that is the policy reference numbers for the identified actions were just missed off the plan, so we're just proposing to add that back in before we go out for consultation.
Mover and second. Oh, hang on. Oh, yeah. Mover and second. With those. All right. Okay, I'll put those amended recommendations. All those in favour, key my eye. Any against? Motion carried. Kia ora tātou. Mo mai te poki. Oh, you've got two. We've got a couple of matters here for. Yep. Okay. Thanks, live stream people. Ngā mihi kia koutou. We're just going to go into some council-only business. And all our manuhiri. Damon stays on. Damon, yeah, no.